Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is such a treat to be here today. Today I have the honor of bringing the vibes from Velan Cadden. Velan, how are you, bro?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Better for having you here in this connection today. An absolute blessing. And just for those tuning in, I'll give you a quick synopsis, which is Velan with his partner Adya, his beautiful wife. They are the founders, the creators, the space holders for Sacred Seed. Sacred Seed is, to put it humbly, is a yoga offering, but there's a lot more to that. And for those that are tuning into it, hopefully you'll tune into more around what's on offer through this podcast. But an absolute treat to have you here today, bro.
Thank you, bro.
So how did you start with Sacred Seed? Let's start there.
So Sacred Seed is just an extension of our life walk. Many years ago, 7 years ago, or more actually, I was traveling through Central America, and I spent some time in Guatemala working in a mystery school in a place called Las Piramides, which is a school of the esoteric arts of the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life. Yeah. And I spent some time doing silence there. I did 90 days in a pyramid there. And at this moment, my life started to take some pretty big shifts. And a few people started saying to me, you need to go to this community, Pachamama. And, after the third time, I went online and checked it out. And I saw this beautiful lady with a tattoo on her arm. And I was like, wow, some beautiful women at this community. And long story short, I followed that kind of gut instinct and went to Pachamama, and I met that lady on the website and realized that she was my wife.
How's that for following the signs?
So essentially, yeah, we just connected really deeply on the level of the body and on the level of just the depth of our connection, and then from there we just started sharing trainings and a lot of work around embodiment together. So it just rose from that what we were walking in our own life.
Yep. Awesome. And so something I've got to, because my girlfriend went and she went to Las Pyramids as well last year, and we had some really, like, San Marcos is just, Lake Atilan is really special, right? A really beautiful place. So you were there for 90 days, because I know they offer like a full moon course and the sun course, but you were there for quite an extended period of time.
Yeah, I was there for 2 years in the end, and did many different retreats, 30-day silence, 90-day silence, and essentially I went from finishing my business major to doing a complete 360-degree turn.
So, I was going to say, so what was the impetus to sort of, like, what was your life before you went away to do this course? Like something in business you just touched on.
Yeah, so essentially I studied business to make my father happy. And then I just went overseas and essentially actually my biggest kind of spiritual opening, I somehow found myself in Bolivia in the jungle there, and working with a 140 kilo male jaguar for 2 months. And this, not at the time because I was more probably ignorant, stupid on some level, but essentially kind of that unfolded to be kind of my big spiritual opening in that moment, just working with him and walking him for 8 hours a day in the jungle, and just learning from a true master.
That is not your average story, and I think it definitely gets into something that just tuning in from afar. even it's quite, like, you touched on the idea of embodiment, and we'll probably get to that shortly. But just the one thing that is sacred seed, and everything that you guys are putting out it's quite obvious. It's very hard to miss that a lot of what you exude is the right word, is reconnection to nature, and whether that's our own inner nature or the elements. And I was really looking forward to have a chat around just the part that nature plays. And this is an amazing insight into where that potentially started, like ending up in the unbelievable. That's incredible. That's incredible. So yeah, can we have a chat about that? Because I know a lot of I guess the first place that I got in touch, like got tuned into our relationship, was through Devani, and she makes these amazing altars, amazing earth altars, and she had this beautiful prayer for the water, and then it was kind of triggered for me that you guys are related, and for some reason, again, like I said before we started this, you've been on the radar. I don't know why. I just surrendered to the process of like just trusting that we're going to do a podcast together. But yeah, what does reconnection mean to you?
It's a big one. I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces of my journey, is that reconnection and that realignment, especially to the elements, and the elements as ancestral teachers. One of my teachers, Kamita, who's one of the spiritual Sundance chief of Ecuador, very powerful woman, 5'5", and can put any male in their place quite quickly. But essentially, she talks about the reactivation of the memory. And what has been lost, what has been forgotten in society, is that lack of connection. Even starting, like in our trainings, in our yoga teacher trainings, we start with the feet, we start with the root, and the fact that we wear rubber shoes, that instant disconnection from the mother, and the importance of that reconnection through many layers, but very specific, the alignment back with the elements and the teachings that those elements offer us, and that is wide in terms of the teachings that I've been exposed to, which is both from the North and South indigenous cultures of America, but also I work with the Shaolin monk called Master Zen Chuxiang, and he works a lot with the water. His lineage, his very powerful lineage of internal energetic arts, works with the reconnection back to the water. And the water's in our body, the emotions, but also the cellular fluid, and how we connect to that fascial matrix, that internal nature, and what that means, which is essentially to slow down, so that we can perceive, so that we can listen, so that we can begin to understand the rhythms of life and the rhythms of nature, and how we've been so disconnected from that, through having everything under our fingertips and flying across the world and doing all these things, and not being tuned to the fact that those rhythms have a very powerful and significant impact on our body, on our emotions, on our mental state, and on our life.
Amazing. And for those just listening in, to clarify, when you mean the elements, we're not talking about the chemistry chart. We're talking about earth, fire, wind, and water.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I really respect that. I find that really, really juicy. Just because I guess for a long time, I guess growing up Indian, I've just had this perspective on spirituality for a long time. And after a while, a lot of it seemed very out there and very, like, in need of a better way of putting it, perhaps astral or something. But I didn't really know, like, what that was informing my day-to-day, and why, like, what was my day-to-day spirituality, until I started really asking myself some questions, perhaps applying the Socratic method or something. And it just started getting down to the fact that, what is my relationship with the water that I'm drinking? What is my relationship to the food that I'm eating? What is my relationship with how much time I'm spending in nature? And then I started realizing that actually these direct experiences that I'm having, are actually my spiritual experience, and allowing that to sort of inform and really, I guess, ground in my spirituality via the elements. And I bring that in as a frame to sort of discuss embodiment, because a lot of what you guys do is embodiment. And I know that, from the outside looking in, it's just yoga, but I know that your Shaolin monk guy is pretty amazing as well. But then obviously you touched on, there's a lot coming in from the lineages of North America and South America. And how does that, describe embodiment to us, and your take on it, please?
So it's a massive piece. The first, the first piece that comes to me when we speak about that is how disconnected and how fragmented we've become as a society. And you only have to look as far as social media. And, even if you look at the specifics of yoga and how it's been commodified, and how I hope I don't offend too many people when I speak on this level, but how actually the more sexy you are and the more skin you show on social media all of a sudden determines on some level your popularity as a teacher. And when we share our yoga teacher training, which on some level the first thing that we share in our yoga teacher training is welcome, you've come to a yoga teacher training, but we're not going to we want you to let go of the idea of becoming a teacher, because this work is really about undoing, about unbecoming, so that we can become a vessel. And that's really the path of embodiment for us, is forming a relationship, so that somehow we realize the importance of this system as a whole. And as we begin to clear, as we begin to create space, as we begin to slow down so that we can begin to perceive and listen to the internal signals, that all of a sudden we start to clear the vessel. We start to clear the body, we start to clear the mind, so that we can release the need to become and realize that we already are. And through that undoing, we come to a place of understanding that we are just a vessel for some divine energy that wants to pass through. And the more we clean that vessel, the more we engage with the elements, and that deep reflection of nature within ourselves, the more we can be a vessel for that deeper, I like to say, sacred activism, which is so needed on the planet at this time. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Why are we practicing yoga? And it's certainly not that. I find yoga sometimes to be a little box. And how are we taking this information, this ancient system, and how are we embodying that, how are we walking that in our everyday moment? And a lot of what I heard in your sharing is that a lot of the spirituality can be very far out there, can be astral, as you said. But what we're talking about is Mother Earth, is coming back to our feet, is coming back to very simple practices of breathing, of being aware of what we speak and the words that we use, knowing that these are, spells in our life. And the more we become clear of how we walk and how we use our words and how we even breathe, how we relax our abdomen, our dantian, endless source of energy, is essentially going to reflect the foundation of the energy, the foundational energy of our life.
Amazing. I just want to bask in what you just said, but I think I'll listen to it again. There was this idea of unbecoming to become a vessel that really intrigues me. because I think a lot of people, and I think there's a real rub in there, because I think a lot of people are like society is driven, even just that word driven implies to become something, to the next iteration. And I understand, and the name of the podcast is Inspired Evolution, and so it's like continual evolution to try and evolve for like what's coming next. But I've always, I guess recently I've been using that as a calibration for myself, is the idea of, you're on the right path when the being and the becoming are actually equally as exciting, because a lot of people sacrifice their today for what they potentially may become, and that's not who they're meant to become because it doesn't feel right in the present moment. And then there's a lot of people who are sacrificing, are giving everything to their being, which then gives the idea of what potentially will become. And I haven't really looked at it the other way, but you've just brought that to light. Is like how supremely can you just be, and let the like allow the becoming to become an unbecoming, to sort of just clear out, and hold space for, as you said, whatever's coming through. In that, you also touched on the idea that there's the mental, the emotional, the physical, and we've discussed the connection between the earth and us, but I think there's definitely a space to have a conversation for the connection between the different, I almost want to say parts, but they're not really parts, I guess, experiences of ourselves, like the mental, the emotional, and the physical.
Absolutely. So I think the first piece, the misunderstanding on some level of especially, I guess I can just speak of the experience, especially of holding the yoga teacher trainings, and what's that kind of understanding that's awakened from seeing what people come with, and that is very much that often the ground, the mundane, the shadow is often bypassed, is often not fully looked, not fully seen. And that's a deep part of our work, to look at the blood and bone, and to look at the sickness of society, and to look at the mind sometimes, and to come into deep acceptance of that. And as we, begin to accept ourselves, our heart opens. But, there's a lot of spiritual idea, and there's a lot of talk around this at the moment, but a lot of the deeper part of our work is to invite the truth, is to invite the fullness of who you are. And that is a deep and vulnerable space to really begin to open to that. And I feel like that's certainly part of our medicine that we share in the trainings, is to open people to, first of all, create a safe container where they see that it's actually unlocking the energetic blocks and limitations as we begin to open that Pandora's box, and we begin to look at those corners of self. And, when we look at society, there's a huge undercurrent. Me and my wife, one of my favorite sharings in our training is about relationship. And I'm very passionate on some level about the walk of, or the man's role, and one of the deepest pieces, which is a little bit taboo, which I love to talk about, is pornography. First and foremost, we're looking at sexuality, but you look at pornography as one of the biggest industries in the world, and the dark shadow of that, and just to give it a voice. Often these shadow places, this is just one example, but as we give them a voice, all of a sudden it doesn't become a burden on our shoulders or a secret that we're carrying. As we begin to unlock these shadow places, it grounds us into the moment. And it's a powerful place for us to also see that we all have shadow. We're all fucked up. We're all doing our best. And when we actually come to that realization together in a circle, in a community, it gives immense power, because so often there's so much social nicety, there's social contracts that we play out, which is completely avoiding the deeper layers of what we're feeling and what is actually in the end blocking our ability to live in our full potential.
There's oh man, there's so much goodness in that. Just to clarify for the listeners, I guess shadows are the things that we'd rather hide about our aspects of ourself. And I love that there's a whole conversation around social contracts, because it's all a bunch of belief systems that, you know, were instilled to, whether they were there to serve us or not. At some point, many of them don't serve us at the moment. But I think the real conversation to be had is the next thing I'd like to ask you about is like just the dance between vulnerability and empowerment, because it's so counterintuitive to the mainstream way of thinking. Is that, you know, bravado and macho strength is power. But as you said, you know, you guys are, through your work, you and Adya, you're creating a safe container for people to actually, you know, strip back into the fullness of who they are. But you mentioned that takes a deep sense of vulnerability. But then you can obviously imagine that, you know, being the full sense of who you are is quite empowering.
Absolutely. And I think there is a huge or a deep misconception that actually to touch people's hearts, and as this, you know, there's a calling for new leaders. The old system is broken, and the old system is very masculine and it's very rigid. And what is awakening on the planet at the moment is the power of the feminine voice and the realness and connection that awakens when someone opens that vulnerability. All of a sudden there's a resonance. You know, we're all intuitive beings, and somehow when there's not that, when there is that bravado or that machismo or that needing to be something that actually you're not, again, it blocks the flow of energy. And that rawness, that vulnerability gives a deep sense of resonance and connection, especially in leadership. And I feel like that's a massive piece of the puzzle that we're working with at the moment, is that embodiment and the new leadership, and what that means. Fluidity, ability to dance into the unknown, and the unknown is vulnerable. So that space of allowing or coming into those spaces of unknown with trust, and knowing that vulnerability is a tool for you to connect with people, and is a tool for you to inspire. And we see in our work, the more vulnerable and the more raw we become, the more resonant and the more connected the circle becomes.
I love that. One of my highest values is connection, and just to pair that with vulnerability was a really beautiful insight. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you've just been articulating, I guess, really eloquently the inspired evolution and what it's been for me, because obviously I recently left my job in order to pursue this, and I didn't know where this was all going, and now it looks like I teach meditation and coach construction workers on construction sites, which was a really bizarre place for me to end up, because
Beautiful, yeah.
The meditator and the engineer, but unfortunately, two people every 2 days, one person in construction in just this country alone takes their own life, because there is so much disconnect, and just that, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, because coming out onto a construction site and just having that space of the meditator really softens people, and they make themselves vulnerable. Stuff like they've always wanted to talk about that they've never been able to, like whether it's anger, whether it's, you know, their inability to forgive, or, you know, letting go and stuff like that. Really, really a gift. and you touched on that, is that, you know, there's a whole new paradigm, because we're looking for new leaders. You know, the old way was quite masculine and quite rigid, embedded with that bravado. And then you mentioned, you know, this idea of the feminine. You know, can we ground that in? Like, what does more of that look like? Does it look more community? Please. Oh, yeah, you.
Yeah, I should get my wife out of bed. But I can say that my biggest, and I can say that, you know, relationship has been my greatest teacher, and I also live in a community that has a very strong feminine aspect. Mm-hmm. And what I see, or what I perceive with woman, is the space to hold and contain a space of compassion, and a space to listen, you know, which is such a valuable and somehow deceptive or a piece that's missed often, is that capacity to listen and to perceive from that place of listening. So I really see, you know, a lot of my mentors actually at the moment are women, and what I receive from them is a level of love and also care, you know, and I think that's also, we can tie that back into the fragmentation and dizziness of this planet. You know, Mother Earth is the feminine energy, and somehow we've lost contact with that care. So there's that, I feel, you know, with my own self, that deep calling to come back into that, what that means to be in connection with the mother, with the earth, and what we can all learn as a humanity, what we can all learn as brothers from a women, and also that dynamic dance between allowing feminine's voice. You know, I can speak very vulnerably, and I see it within my own family, I see it within my own relationship. What's been passed down through my own male lineage is the fact that I maybe know better, or that I'm right, or that I might cut them off. And it's been a very humbling journey of you know, I have a very strong woman beside me, to reflect, you know, that humility to really listen, and to come into a place of humility, so that I can receive and unlock all those layers that have been passed down through my father. And yes. Learning slowly.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't help but smile. Just because, there are two virtues, as you were mentioning, the father, that my father handed down to me, which have guided me truer and truer and truer and truer. And I like the two things I would advocate the most in any given situation, which is humility and humor. Because as long as you can laugh at yourself, you end up humbled, and humility is everything. So there's a lot in that, and I really love the potency of the way you articulated just the humility to listen. Just that, the depth of that, and then that's really beautiful in its feminine essence as well. Just that soft container, the humility to listen. You touched on this, and this is something I really wanted to explore. And I guess in the essence of getting vulnerable, I probably wouldn't normally say this word, but I want to just honor and have a conversation around mentors, because I know, you know, you travel quite a bit to centers all over the world, to sort of connect in and ground in with people that, you know, are guiding the process, and there are mentors. And the word that I'm afraid to use, which I'm going out and speaking from the heart, is, you know, I've been on a bit of a journey myself and traveled quite a bit, and, you know, I think this is part of the process ultimately, but there's a lot of charlatans, especially in this space as well. people that are not in their integrity, because a lot of the like when you're talking about spirituality and really embodying it in, unfortunately somehow there's a lack of authenticity. I guess the conversation I want to have is, how do you find yourself guided to, and even maybe surprised and some of the lessons from your mentors?
Sorry, just to kind of confirm that question.
I asked too many questions at once. That's my bad. How do you? Okay, let's keep it simple. How do you have? What's been the process around finding your mentors and really trusting and like finding that they are the right ones for you? Because I know a lot of people often disqualify the value of a mentor, or they don't really know how to reach out to a mentor. So, have you found your mentors?
I'm very blessed. I live in a community where many potent spiritual teachers of many different traditions pass through, and I would say one of the main pieces in the mentor is actually someone that nearly not scares me, but challenges me. I think as a young man, just to also kind of touch for a moment on initiation, and I think that ties in with the mentoring, is that as a young man, with the dizziness and the confusion of society, I was looking for initiation, and I was looking for rites of passage, and obviously in society it's was found by how much booze I could drink with my friends, or how many drugs I could take. And slowly as I started to travel and get connected more with the indigenous and the native traditions, what became apparent was the importance of the initiation process. And I came in contact with mentors that had sacred designs, which are containers or ancient containers that essentially initiate us and help us shift our perception. So I can speak specifically about a tradition that I work with, which is the Vision Quest, where we go out onto the land for 5 days and 4 nights without food and water. And one of my mentors, Mauricio, he's Colombian, and he's someone that I would say is a mentor for me, and scares me on some level as well, because he's challenging me to look at the way I'm walking. He's challenging to look at what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, how I'm walking, how I'm talking. And this process of the Vision Quest was a huge moment of finding that initiation, because I was always self-initiating, and then all of a sudden I found an ancient design that created a platform for me to transcend the limiting stories. First of all, to go for 5 days and 4 nights without food and water. And again, we can tie it back into the elements and the reverence that brought for the sacredness of this medicine, the water. Because I tell you, after 5 days of no water, that first sip is you realize that medicine is a very important resource and medicine that we keep clean as a humanity. So I'm just tying in a few pieces here, but
that's perfect.
But
thank you.
But a mentor is the resonance. For me, it's always resonance, and someone that I can see is walking in integrity and walking in truth and walking in a way that inspires me. And some mentors, some mentors are just also, I see in the training space, a mentor on that level of, also I just want to tie in that level of being a teacher, and that new paradigm of shifting out of, the guru into this space of seeing that we're all being taught all the time. I don't even see myself as a teacher. I'm just sharing what I walk in my life. And I think that is the essence of a mentor, someone that is walking in such integrity and truth and connection to their purpose that it leaves you no choice but to, maybe bring your hand out to ask for help, to to ask for guidance in whatever form that looks like.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. And there's something in there that you touched on, which I've been hosting this gathering for the last 14 months in my home. It's called Mandala Moments, and it's basically people come over and we just share and discuss what's coming up for each other, whether it's spirituality, personal development, or philosophy, or whatever it is. Like, we don't really set a theme, but the collective consciousness is usually tapped into. It might be a week that you're really being called to be compassionate to someone that's challenging you, and then we'll all just sit around and have a chat around that for 10 or 15 of us will spend most of the night talking and just celebrating community. But the thing that I love the most about that is that there are no gurus. Like, yes, I opened up my house, but I just create a container, and these people that all inspire me in one way, shape, form, or manner seem to come, and they all teach each other things. And it's been the most amazing journey, just seeing Natalie learn from Jason, and Jason learn from Tim, and then Tim learn from, and it's just this. It's really humbling just to realize that we all are learning from each other, exactly as you said, all the time. And there are no gurus. We're all each other's messengers and guides for certain aspects, and there's handing over all your power is not what we're called to do. I really appreciated the little nuance of just that little bit of how the mentor scares you. Just that little bit. It's just and I feel like that draws out that vulnerability to empower you again. So it's almost like self-contained. That was really awesome. You mentioned before we dropped into this conversation, we talked a little bit about ritual as well, and you were talking about going out onto your vision quest, and it must cannot even imagine the intensity of not eating and not drinking whilst being out there for 4 to 5 days. I know I think this is probably a nice little segue to talk about the Sundance Ritual and what you're honoring in that and why.
So the Sundance is a little bit delicate to talk about on some level, but it is a continuation of very ancient prayer that's been going on, or that is the essence comes from the Lakota people in the North Americas, but now is being bridged and in alignment with what they say the Condor Eagle prophecy is being bridged through both North and South Americas. So again, not to speak too much because it is a kind of very sacred initiatory process, but it's another very powerful prayer, a dry prayer. So again, without food and water, under the sun, dancing, and essentially it's a prayer for the earth. It's a prayer for community. It's a shedding. These processes just strip you back to blood and bone, so that in those moments of suffering that we remember what's important to us, and through that suffering we gain insight into the deeper layers and the deeper prayers that want to pass through us. So again, just that reorientation of prayer becoming something that we want, into opening to the great mystery, and a prayer becoming the overflowing of gratitude for the life that we get to walk on planet Earth, and the great abundance that this planet gives us. And these processes give us this opportunity. They say the elders say to give thanks for the opportunity to give thanks. These sacred designs give us the opportunity to say thank you. And these initiation processes, I guess, are spreading on some level. It's that rekindling of the fire, the rekindling of these ancient ways that help us, again, connect to the elements and help us align our prayer to what is really important on this planet at this time.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I really resonate with the opportunities to give thanks, for the ability, and then the giving thanks. I would love to chat about prayer. I would love to chat about prayer. But I think what I'm going to ask is about initiation, because there's a lot, you touched on it before, is, I remember my rite of passage, becoming 21. I pretty much went out and partied a whole bunch with my mates and woke up the next day with like the worst headache ever and just completely destroyed myself as like a rite of passage into like, yeah, I'm officially a man and I feel like shit. So it was really interesting. And since then there's been, travels and experiences that have had that lasting impact of initiation. I recently came back from a month in Brazil, connected to, I guess, a community that is Ciranda, which is also connected to Pachamama.
Beautiful.
Yeah, such a blessing. Just these amazing custodians, just doing incredible work for people like us. But yeah, the music, like I came back with my first guitar, and it's just I've always been drumming, and the hang pan, and there's always been this amazing connection to percussion, but really came back with my first guitar, and the intention for the people that were visiting was to like initiate them and activate them into music, and then to sort of hear someone say that is one thing, right? It's like, cool, someone set an intention, this is beautiful, it's like their guiding vision, but then to have their intention all of a sudden like infuse into your life, and you're sitting there and every day playing a guitar, just going, wow, like I've actually been initiated into something, like someone has helped me, and this sort of touched on the mentor thing before, someone has helped me unlock an aspect of myself which is connecting me even deeper to myself, which is just a majestic journey to be on. But I think I just want to flag that point of initiation and maybe just ask more about how that weaves into the work that you guys are doing with Sacred Seed as well, and obviously your offerings.
So the first piece I want to touch on around initiation is a concept that they speak about in the Red Robe, which is paying for the wood, which essentially means that we have these initiations as an offering, because we are gifted with this life and this planet and all this food and this clean water, and these initiations are an opportunity again to give thanks for that. But also, I guess what the initiation process is really a space to meet our shadow as well. Often the initiation process is a place where we take ourselves to the limit, where often the mind comes in and begins to question, and can I do it? Is it possible? And the initiation is a place to break through all the limiting beliefs of ourselves. And just to say, for example, in the Vision Quest, there might be 22. Like I'm heading down to the Vision Quest in here in Costa Rica, in the community that I live in called Pachamama. I'm heading down in 4 days, and there's 25 people going out onto the mountain. So they say they go and put their life on the line for the community, for their family, for the prayer of this new way. But that can only be done with the deep support and holding of the community. And the supporting role is nearly as important, in fact, is equally as important as the questing role. So within that initiation, there's such a deep dance and interplay between giving and receiving, and that understanding, or that connection to that we're all doing it together. That we think we go out on these self-initiations, but what we're actually doing is we're initiating ourselves. Again, I connect back into the yoga path to create space so that we can give and serve our family, our children, our planet in a better way. And this initiation path it strips us bare to what's important. And I can say, you know, within our own work, the rituals that we work with are a moment to come out of your comfort zone, because out of your comfort zone is where all the growth is where all the potential lies, to see, you know, how we can be also within the intensity of life. And the initiation is a big lean into the unknown. And the real work, you know, for the seekers, for the spiritual seekers, isn't ever a journey from the known to the known. The deepest journey that we take is from the unknown to the unknown. And that importance, again, this is where the yoga comes in. We have to have the tools, the breathing, the connection to feeling and sensing, so that we can anchor ourselves in the moment, and within that chaotic, swirling intensity of life that we're all passing at this time, how can we stay centered in the unknown? Because really, you know, I'm touched by your kind of the purpose of this podcast, and what I sense and what I feel about this. And it's really that path of also trust into the unknown, and what that means to embody right now, here, and walk that path of trust.
Yeah. It's daunting but empowering, exactly what you touched on before, the vulnerability and the empowerment. I would not be doing this service if I overlooked something you mentioned, which was our family in a better way. To give and receive. You know, we go through these initiations and almost what they call hormesis, you know, what doesn't kill me only makes me stronger, so that you can come back with a certain level of fortitude. And then naturally the question may arise is, why are we doing this? And then you mentioned, you know, to serve our family and our community in a better way. What is, you know, I think we've discussed this quite a bit, the impetus for, you know, there is, you know, a need for things to, just new leaders and a new paradigm which is being born. And you mentioned the unknown and walking into the unknown from the unknown, the path of the seeker, which was, I've never heard it articulated like that, and it was, it really resonates. So thank you for sharing that. I guess, what does that look like for you in the day-to-day, like showing up better for your family and your loved ones?
So this is the most essential piece, you know. Excuse my language for a moment, but what the fuck are we doing with all this spiritual work if at the end of the day, after this big expansion, that all of a sudden we come back and we treat our family like shit, you know, or we treat our beloved, you know, and this is the path of integrating this spiritual work, and this is where embodiment ties back in. How do we embody, how do we integrate all these spiritual understandings into washing the dishes, into reading a book to our to our child instead of being on social media? You know, what is the point of all this work unless we can integrate it back into our families? And I like to say, you know, with ritual there's often an altar, but you know, it's an altar that we go and it helps us connect to the divine. But the true altar is our family. The true altar for me is my wife and my daughter Zia and my daughter Munai. And if I can't see that, if I can't integrate that, then, you know, there's no point in me dressing in white and going to a yoga class, because that is the work of our time, is integrating these spiritual expansions back into our walking life. Again, embodiment. How do we embody these understandings, these spiritual openings back into the fabric of our life?
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's beautiful. On that note, I guess it's time for me to sort of start diving out of the conversation. I want to ask if there is a book in particular that has left a lasting impact on you, perhaps your favorite book, or something you've read. Is there one you'd recommend for someone tuning into this conversation to go pick up?
That is a tricky one.
I know, there's so many, isn't it? It's always the hardest question.
Okay, so yeah, you know what, since I came to Pachamama, since I came to, I didn't read a book. So actually, I might throw a curveball and say, find the lessons in your life. Have the courage to really look at the hall of mirrors, which is your life.
Yeah, which is potent. I think oftentimes, even with books, I've noticed that we sometimes read them as escapism, to read them and then not actually integrate anything that we've read in them either. And I've noticed different iterations of the journey, people have reflected that, it's a time for me to learn from myself. There was a time to learn from other people in their texts and stuff, but then it comes to a time when to learn from yourself. So thank you for that, sharing that as well. If we had the opportunity, you and I, to erect a billboard in the intense energies of Times Square, New York, what would Velan's billboard and message to the masses be?
Accept yourself and your heart will open.
Yow! Yeah, love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Beautiful. And I guess just lastly, my favorite and last question is beyond, the space holder, beyond the vessel, beyond the skin suit. Who is Velan?
Very regular. I'm just a kid, I'm simple and complex at the same time, but I love adventure, and there's a deep, I'm a Gemini, so there's a deep duality. I love adventure and exploring and expanding, and yet my family and my children and my wife and yeah, my inner circle, my close circle of family and friends is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I love that. And I think that's I'm going to open up a little initiation as a space for the opportunity to give thanks for just what you've shared, and just the wisdom that you've been so gracious to afford us in this conversation, and just the authenticity with which you do embody everything that you're sharing. It's we've had many different questions from many different angles, but the messages has continuously been the same, whether it's authenticity, community, acceptance, truth, and my favorite, humility. So thank you so much for not just obviously today, and your time and your presence, and taking the time out to make this align and flow, and for sharing your wisdom with the listeners, but also everything that precedes this present moment, and all the work you've done on yourself, and continue to, from that point on, also the path that you're walking. At the Inspired Evolution, I like to say, we're wishing you all the best on your journey, but I don't even know if it's a journey anymore, if it's just one big eternal now. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm walking into the unknown. So, but just, like a heart full of prayers for you, brother, and real gratitude.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so I just want to, before I tie out, if someone wants to get in touch with yourself or Adya, what's the best way to get in touch with the offerings of Sacred Seed?
Just jump online there, www.sacredseed.com.au, and all the information's there.
Awesome. And if they want to fill out, like there's an online fill out form or something they can send your way, or everything will be, they can step their way through the process there?
Yeah, they can connect there.
Beautiful. Perfect. Too easy. Thank you so much again for your blessings, brother.
Thank you so much, bro, and all that you're walking and sharing.
Much love.